If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel.
Hey, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel. I'm your host, the Innkeeper, and this is our live call-in talk show all about the Wheel of Time. Now tonight, well, I guess it's today, isn't it? It's a Saturday afternoon. So today, our show is all about music and the Wheel of Time. What should the Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime sound like? That's a big question considering we've had fans creating music for decades at this point. So I can't wait to introduce my guest here shortly, but just as a reminder, this upcoming Watt Wednesday, yes, that's right, we're back on Watt Wednesday live with RJ's Notes. Therese and Linda will be back. We'll be talking all about Maureen, her story arc through Robert Jordan's notes. That's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you'll be with us. Then the following Sunday, we are covering artists, fandom, and the Wheel of Time with Maria Malandrino, or some of you know her as Memo Art. She's done the chibis, the Wheel of Time chibis. They're amazing. I can't wait to just show those off all week before she's on the show with us. And then I want to make one last note. We just celebrated 1 year here at the Dusty Wheel. So Taylor and I have been working on a little something special. So the following Watt Wednesday, September 2nd, he and I will be premiering this. Winter Dragon, the Dusty Wheel cut. Yes, that Winter Dragon, the Wheel of Time pilot that is much maligned. And yes, it will be the Dusty Wheel cut of it. We can't wait to premiere that on the 2nd. The show will be discussing that cut along with just basically celebrating what's going to be our panels in September and celebrating a year here. Now, in line with that, we're going to be giving away 2 seats to a sneak peek premiere next Sunday night. So if you're here over on YouTube and live chat with us, we're going to give away 2 of those seats if you'd like to be part of that group. So yeah, come over if you're on Twitter, Facebook, make sure you jump over here. We'll open up that lottery here shortly during the show, and then we'll pick 2 winners before the end. And yeah, I look forward to having those 2 fans with us at the sneak peek premiere on Sunday. That's now all said. Let me introduce my guests tonight, Androl, the Bard of Time, and Nikhil Koparkar. How are you doing? Both of you. By the way,
hello.
Yeah, it's the.
Hey,
I always forget to tell guests, like, you can go with the whole handshake or what. I kind of just love to see what everyone's going to choose in that moment to do. So it's awesome having 2 musicians with me here today. I grew up with singers as parents. I'm a theater rat. You know, I've been around music my entire life. Music is extremely meaningful to me and so many others. I'm not the only one, obviously, with you 2. So I thought before we jumped into this, I'd ask you both for a little background of, like, why is this what you've chosen to do with your lives? But before we do that, I want to remind everyone watching, we're going to try not to spoil anything about the Wheel of Time today. Now, Nikhil, I know you're in book 12. Is that right?
Yep.
The point of this episode isn't to tell you plot details or anything for those of you that are watching. So if there are going to be spoilers, you know, someone calls in with a question a bit later, We'll try to warn you. We'll put up a sign. But for now, for both of you, let's try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. And those in chat, let's not purposely ruin things for anyone right now. So that being said, maybe Andrew, let me start with you. How did you get into this? Was this always a lifelong pursuit of yours, or just recently pick it up? When did you first dive into music?
Music I have been doing since I was as small as I can remember, but I started playing guitar and making my own songs when I was about 15. And then I played drums in a band, and then I started singing in a band. And I've always done, little songs on the side, just sitting with my guitar at home. But it was just a year ago, I think, when the show was announced, actually, when I really got into gear and started writing songs, because I was so inspired by the Twitter at Time community.
Yeah, so that's going to come up if you guys are here and you guys know Androl actually created the riff you hear at the beginning of the show. And in a little bit, we're going to have him actually play that live for us. That's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, exactly right. I can't wait till that's as he's all set up for that. I can't wait for that. Nikhil, is it the same thing for you? Was it since you were young? Or
yeah, actually, I still remember. It's like those memories you have sometimes when you're younger that leave an indelible impression on you. And I remember when I was 2 years old, I'd learned to work my dad's cassette player that he had, and I used to listen to Vangelis's Chariots of Fire theme over and over again. So I just remember soundtracks being a huge part of my life. And when I was in high school, the Lord of the Rings movies came out. So I was, going to the theater and watching those, and Howard Shore's timeless music really had such an impact on me and made me think that would be a fun job, being able to write music for films. And I started writing when I was in college. And then when I graduated, I moved to LA, and I've been out here for about 12 years now. And, I played in bands for a while. And slowly, kind of my love of film music and TV music kind of started to take over. And I started kind of pursuing that as a full-time thing a few years back. And then, fast forward to last year when I first heard the show was announced. And actually, I'm kind of a fantasy newbie, I guess. Prior to this, I'd read a lot of Stephen King. So I was, I'd read the Dark Tower series. I'd read, some Harry Potter, the Hobbit. But it was very much like dipping toes into fantasy. And then I heard about this Wheel of Time, and I'd heard it had some Eastern philosophical concepts that are interwoven into the overall philosophy of the Wheel of Time and everything. And I was like, that's kind of interesting because that's so different to regular fantasy. So I just started reading the books, and I got super inspired by them. And I'm like, I gotta express that somehow.
I think that's that common feeling of. That's the way you express yourselves, and I feel that too. There's a certain power in that, in music itself. I remember my parents are singers, and when they would sing, the entire audience would just kind of pause, right? And we were their kids. We ran around, and we knew them well enough to not be affected like everyone else was by it. Right. But I could tell the passion that they had to create that way and use that talent really affected how people moved. You said, you just brought up the idea that you were affected when you went to the theaters and you heard these things and you wanted to be part of that. It's almost like the music affected you. It changed you into someone that loved music, right? And same thing with you. It sounds like Androl. So I'm kind of curious for both of you. What are the kind of most memorable soundtracks to fandoms that you have? What that come to mind? When you hear a song and tie it to a fandom out there, what is the fandom? For me, I think it's Star Wars, right? I hear Star Wars. Do you have one that comes to mind, Nikhil? A particular group of fandom when it comes to a soundtrack?
So I would say probably Star Wars would come into mind. Lord of the Rings, definitely. Just because I was a little older when that came out, and I could look at it from a different lens. I remember, seeing Star Wars when I was 8 years old, and I love the soundtrack. And obviously that has created a whole kind of ecosystem around that, the fans, the way they react to that music. If you think about the way those films are, I remember I had taken like a film scoring course years ago, and they were playing these films, like scenes from these different films, Star Wars being one of them, without the music, and it's just so weird to see that because it's just like a lot of the emotional, like not only just the melodies that one can hum, or they like that leave an impression on you way after you've watched the movie, listened to the soundtrack, but also the emotional beats,
Yep.
of it are just underscored, for lack of a better word, by this music. And so the fandom it creates through those soundtracks.
Yeah, that's interesting. The part, like you brought this up, which is the soundtrack is almost part of that fandom at that point. Like it becomes part of them. Androl, is there one that sticks out to you? Is there whether or not it's a composer or a specific fandom that's tied to a sound for you?
I can agree on both Star Wars and Jaws. I can say.
And Jaws, yeah.
So classic with what you can do with so little, but also I must say Blade Runner sticks out because that soundtrack really made that world.
Yeah,
it's made it futuristic.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is it does complement it. Like I mentioned before, your music kind of starts the show off, and I notice this in chat, which is people. Like they get excited to hear that, like they're wanting to be in this place, like it's bringing them somewhere, right? It's like I'm gonna go to the Dusty Wheel, and part of that like journey to the Dusty Wheel is hearing that music, and without that, it just wouldn't be the same, right? Like Nikhil, like you pointed out, without that music, like the acting was probably fantastic in Star Wars. That's not the point. But being able to get into the world is the point. For those of you that are watching in chat, I'd love to hear I've seen a couple. Lost showed up as one of them. I totally agree with that. What are your favorite? Yeah, basically your favorite show or whatever it is, along with the soundtrack, the match. I'm kind of curious. X-Files, right? That's iconic.
Yeah.
Scott just brought up X-Files. Like you can just. Yeah, there was something about getting almost in that mood of like, do I trust anything? Like that music made me more paranoid, about like trusting people. So, well, for Androl, for you, why the Wheel of Time though? I know you, Nikhil mentioned it. He's come into this maybe a little later. When did you hit the Wheel of Time books?
I must have been in my teens, like 15 or something, when I started reading them. I have always loved fantasy. I started with David Eddings, and on that way it went. And I found this in the library. I was always carrying around a stack of books, only fantasy book, no school books. Always reading. So I just started reading them in Swedish, and then they stopped translating them in, I think, Path of Daggers.
Oh,
and I had to pick up the English versions and read it there. And I discovered that they were much, much better in English.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The translations are not top notch, I can say. So that's how I came into it.
That's awesome. As far as Nikhil, when you decided that this was going to turn into music for you for the Wheel of Time, where were you at? Was there some portion of the book where you're just like, I have to write something in your reading?
I was close to the end of The Great Hunt, and and it was kind of a twofold thing, like in the sense that these characters are all experiencing, coming from the two rivers, and then experiencing for the first time that there's this huge expansive world that they thought was kind of almost a myth, and their discovery of this larger, greater world and the role that they're eventually going to have to play a part in starts getting really revealed in book 2. On my end, I felt like I was discovering so much because for me, my fantasy experience was limited, but I always loved fantasy. I just never got a chance to really do a deep dive to read it. And with the Wheel of Time, it was like, oh my God, there's so much out there to, left to discover. So it really came from a discovery idea. And then I was like, I just got to write something. I got to express this somehow. And, I thought it would be really cool to just write a love letter to Wheel of Time in a musical love letter. And so I did something crazy, and I booked the orchestra session. I still remember it was the orchestra session was July 31st of last year. And I booked it on July 9th, and I hadn't written a note. right? So
Oh my
I
gosh.
was like, I had
Okay,
a note.
so that's interesting, and we're gonna get to that. I want to hear the details about how that came together, and because this is what's interesting, that what you chose to do, and Androl, what you're doing, and I've seen some people mention this in chat, like Blind Guardians, Reflections of Sound.
Right.
If you go on YouTube and just type in Wheel of Time, you get a variety of just music that some fans have put together. Blind Guardians has a very kind of takes a very hard rock, at least that's how I would interpret it, at least for one of the songs I heard. Reflections of Sound is really cool. I don't think they've seen them put anything out for a couple of years about this, but it's nice to have there. You can see that fans love what you both do and what they do, because these YouTube clips have hundreds of thousands of views on them sometimes. So that's what's really interesting to me. And so I did want to, though, bring up one soundtrack that's actually like an official soundtrack. It's called the soundtrack for the Wheel of Time. I think it was done by Robert Barry, and this came out of the Wheel of Time game. I don't know if either of you ever heard of the PC game, but I think it was they had started doing they had done some work for the game, and then this whole soundtrack came together. And actually, I think the thing has like a quote from Robert Jordan on the back. What's fascinating is, and so we took a little bit of that theme song from that one, and I wanted to play that for our viewers now. So I want to ask chat this once you hear this: is this the Wheel of Time theme for you? Like, is this how you imagine it? So Taylor, let's play this clip that we have cut out for the fans. So that's to me, that's not quite what I imagined the Wheel of Time theme was going to be. And there's like 19 of these songs, and some have vocals, some do not. But what's interesting is a lot of bands have taken kind of a very modern twist to, with the instruments that they would like to kind of play. And so I want to ask this question to both of you and to everybody in chat, which is, what is, like, when you think of the Wheel of Time, what do you hear? And do you hear anything? I mean, some people might just be like, I don't hear anything. I need to hear some music. So, Andrew, like, for you, someone says Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. What immediately comes to mind?
Oh, immediately, a hodgepodge of music. I don't think it will be, or I don't think it should be exclusively, Western classical music, because the cultures are so different. So I think we should have a big mix of East Asian music, African music, Western music, to really give the feel of the world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I actually have a quote. Robert Jordan asked us every once in a while. So this first quote from Robert Jordan, let me read it to you. It was paraphrased, but the fan asked what sorts of music he hears in his mind's ear, as it were, while he's writing about the different musical styles in Randland. So it's not a direct, like, what exactly he hears, but it's like, what are his inspirations? Robert Jordan, he said, for example, the Tinker music is obviously gypsy music, Zigeunes, and similar. Tom chanting the tales is quite like the troubadour music of the Middle Ages in continental Europe. As for others, dance music, general folk. He mentioned Irish folk music, gigs and reels, I guess, and ballads. Appalachian hill music, and bluegrass. Yeah, those are just some of the ones that he kind of mentioned that he hears in his head as he's doing some writing. Now, whatever he was writing at the time depends on what he was hearing. Yeah. But like you said, there's so many influences here. Robert Jordan said that he went out and basically grabbed myths from every culture and mixed them all together. And so for me, at least, I hear like a mix of a lot of styles. I don't know, Nikhil, what do you hear? Like the Wheel of Time, what are the sounds that immediately come to mind for you?
I guess I hear it twofold, in the sense that, like, the Wheel of Time in general has kind of a timeless quality to it, for lack of a better word. Like, the books take place during the Third Age, right? So it's supposed to be, I guess, in the distant future, maybe.
Yeah.
Or that's at least how they're saying.
Yep.
So there is something that is kind of timeless that would go through all these different ages, I would feel. But then also, like you and Androl had said, like there are so many different confluences of cultures. Like if you think of the Shan Chan and how there's kind of an Asian cultural influences, but then they also speak with a kind of a drawl to their speech, right? And so that's kind of interesting. And then like you think of Karheen. I'm sorry if the pronunciation.
Kyrien, yeah, but I would say yeah.
Okay, yeah, and they have kind of Asian influences, but then the political intrigue is very kind of, it's got the French game of houses kind of vibe to it. So the genius of Robert Jordan, I feel like, was he didn't go, oh, you know, I'm going to pull this from this culture, this from that culture. It's almost like he combines it in such a subtle way that you don't know where one culture ends and the other one begins. And so I think from a musical standpoint, it would be really cool to explore that, where it's like, you don't listen to it and go, oh, that sounds like traditional Indian music. Yeah. Oh, that sounds like tradition. It's almost like these things become a part of a world orchestra that has this cohesive sound, but borrows from these different places where it's like, oh, this feels like something different. But I can't really tell what it is, you know?
Yeah, I think David Buckley, I don't have his quote. I think he was recently quoted as saying, like, we need, I'm not sure how to interpret it. It's like, we need all the instruments, you know. Now he might have meant all the instruments as in everyone that plays needs to, in other words, I don't want to say exactly what he meant, but as soon as I heard that, I was like, yes, we need all the instruments. You know, we need, like Shantini just said in chat, you know, exotic instruments, you know, like there's an opportunity here to kind of bring sounds to people that maybe we're just not used to hearing. Now, like the Irish, you know, pub songs or something, like that's fun, but to me it's almost overused at this point in a lot of fantasy. And again, the point isn't, well, this one sound is these people and this other sound, like you said, he pulls from everywhere. So it's going to be really interesting. Like I think, and someone pointed this out in chat, like that is a big question that David Buckley has to answer. I'm glad that the three of us don't have to answer that question. Because there's a lot of fans and maybe a lot of disagreement here about what that final sound is going to be. Now, I do want to give Androl this moment. Now, this isn't a necessarily for the Wheel of Time, but this is the sound of the Dusty Wheel. So I want to. This is a live performance by Androl. He threw this out on Twitter at us after we had begun the channel, and we were like, oh my gosh, that's awesome that this person we don't know would just write us basically an intro song that became kind of synonymous with our channel. So, Androl, give us a little Dusty Wheel theme music here.
Have you had your fill today? Hungry for news, so they say. If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel.
Yeah. I love it. That's so great.
Yeah. There we go. Woo.
That was amazing. Oh, that was so
awesome, man.
That was awesome. Yeah, I love that. We heard that. I just remember the whole house here, the whole inn was like, that is so cool. I think even my daughters were impressed, and their dad on YouTube is not an impressive thing to them. But I think your song was for sure. Yeah, that just it has meaning now, right? It's part of the Dusty Wheel in the same way that this is, you know, that this music that David Buckley is going to forever be synonymous with the Wheel of Time. What's your process, Androl, when it comes to that you just did? You know, this music, what do you, is there anything that you have? Do you have a process where this is how I build theme music like that?
No.
It's just, for you, it's just...
Yeah, I usually scroll Twitter all the time, and I see something, but what is this? I see a little bit of Dusty Wheel, and I just sits with my guitar and, you know, try out some things, and I found a nice riff. And then I just started writing words, and then it goes fast as heck.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I love the organic side of that it just came together for sure. Now, Nikhil, the same thing here. So for me, when I heard your your theme, your cover,
Mm-hmm.
maybe unlike the soundtrack for the Wheel of Time, it actually did strike me as more cinematic. And so I want us to listen to a cut of Nikhil's work that he did, and he can tell us what you're going to see here is the Budapest Orchestra
Right.
playing this. Now, and I want to hear all about that experience, but let's just watch and listen here for a moment to what Nikhil came up with.
Cool.
Yeah, so how can you not love that kind of theme music? I'm seeing this in chat. I don't know, Nikhil, if you're watching, and hopefully you are
Yes.
watching the chat, because absolutely, I'm seeing chills. That was one of the common just chills listening to it.
Thanks.
Yeah, so congratulations. There is something very cinematic. It has its own sound, which I really liked.
Thank you.
It's almost. I hear a lot of things that are very close to Superman and Star Wars, if that makes sense. Like there's a
Totally,
lot of
yeah.
Indiana Jones, Superman, and Star Wars in almost every score out there. This felt something that wasn't just almost cliche fantasy, but it definitely had that. It had that cinematic, I don't know, fantasy feel to it, though. It worked for me. So I'm kind of curious how this all came together for you. And as you tell us the story, I'm going to remind everybody, if you're here and you're enjoying this kind of live Wheel of Time talk show, please give this video a like so other fans will find us and they can hear all about the music that Androl and Nikhil do and others. I put a bunch of different artists in the description, including Blind Guardians, Reflection of the Sound. And I know there's new content creators in the Wheel of Time coming out all the time, creating music, which is really inspirational to fans. So we'd love it if you'd like and subscribe to the channel as always. And that being said, let's hear the story, Nikhil, how this came together. You just told us, you gave us a key here.
Yeah.
You started writing this July 7th, you said, and you had to have it
July
done by the end of
9th,
July 9th, and you had to have it done by the end. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, but even though that was kind of a crazy deadline, I totally set upon myself. It was also, in a sense, a couple years in the making, in the sense that I write a lot of music for like films and TV. I'm based in Los Angeles, and a couple years prior, I decided to do kind of an experiment with a friend of mine who has a santur, which is kind of a 100-string ancient Indian Persian dulcimer. And we were kind of thinking about is there a way that one could use that instrument with a different tuning, different timbre, different cultural background, and incorporate it into Western kind of cinematic music? And so that whole journey began with, having him play the instrument the wrong way, the non-traditional way, and stuff like that, because there's so much untapped potential from doing that. A lot of these instruments are, hundreds or thousands of years old, and they've never been played more than the traditional way. So there's so much untapped potential there. And so through that album process, it really kind of got me, I think I kind of absorbed a lot of different cultural music through that. And then just from working on, I worked on a fantasy film last year as well, and I started using instruments from India and China, and incorporating that with a Western cinematic sound. So it was definitely something that had been brewing in my mind from that standpoint. And then for Wheel of Time, it's I wanted to give myself a more gut reaction type of writing process for this. I didn't want to overthink it. I felt this feeling of discovery, and I felt this love for the series, and I wanted to capture that in its like purest, way that I could. So that's why I set that crazy deadline. And then I just went to, and the piece came out in like 3 days. And
Oh, wow.
and then, I just orchestrated out all the sheet music and sent it over to them. And, Budapest is just a phenomenal orchestra to work with. I'd worked with them on a few films before. And the way they play their strings also is a little bit different to the traditional classical way that they play. I don't even know how to describe it, but it just sounds a little different to me. And that also felt like it serves the, kind of the unique feel of what I was trying to at least do with this Wheel of Time piece. And, it's one of those things where it was really, I had no specific goal with it, except like, hey, it would be cool to send it to the production team, see what they think. It would be cool to send it to the fans, but I wasn't expecting anywhere near the reaction it got. It was just kind of a fun thing I wanted to do.
Well, there's something really inspiring about seeing an orchestra, at least for me. Take a piece like that, right? There's that is the mix, and that's why I loved having you both on. Watching Androl just sit there with his guitar and knock that out, and just see there's something raw and amazing about that, and then also to see this entire orchestra kind of take your piece, and so that video you put together with it was just I don't know how to say it. Like everyone in chat's saying the same thing. It's just really amazing and pretty epic that you came up with that in just a couple days. And you've had the reaction you've had with the fans. So that's, and I love that you were right at the end of the Great Hunt, and that's a great place. When you said that you were kind of at the end of the Great Hunt for this, there is, you can almost, I'm trying to have, in my head, almost imagine the end of the Great Hunt with that music. I won't go any further and spoil anything, but now I want to go back and listen to it. As that last piece of the Great Hunt happens. I have to do that after the show for sure.
Awesome.
Now I have some more questions for you about that. I saw some questions come up in chat. I just want to remind everyone, this is a live call-in talk show. If you want to give us a call, the number well. It's 1-313-TALK-WATT, 1-313-825-5968. Give us a call there. We'll pull you into the show if you have a question for Nikhil or Androl, or just you have opinions about what the Wheel of Time should sound like. We'd love to hear from you. And that being said, I did see one question come up, Nikhil, for you, which was, are there? You mentioned that you've done some work for some other, movies and such. Is there anything you can mention that you want to tell the fans about that they might know that you've done work on?
A lot of the stuff I've done has been mainly indie projects. I've also helped other composers on kind of taking some of their ideas and what they call score production, which basically means they'll kind of write out the music, and sometimes they're working on big shows or films and they need a team of people to help them kind of take those ideas and get them ready for live orchestra, get the sheet music orchestrated and things like that. So I've done some score production for a composer called Emil Mosseri, who did a TV series called Homecoming, which is on Amazon. So that's we worked on myself and this team called Joy Music House, which is run by a dear friend named Catherine Joy, and we kind of did the score production side of things on that and a few other films and stuff. But yeah, like a lot of the things I'd worked on. So the fantasy film that I'd worked on last year was an indie production. So you can imagine doing all the VFX, and it was such an ambitious effort, and it turned out so well. I can't wait for people to see it. But it's a lot of those things are, you kind of figure out based on budget. It's not like an Amazon budget or something like that, right? Netflix, where there's a lot of money to spend on orchestra and really experimenting with these different instruments. So it was a lot of trying to go, okay, given what we have, how can we maximize that? So a lot of that ends up being a fun experience,
Yeah, juggling. For sure. No, and just this, I think you even put out there. I want to say somebody asked you what did it cost to get the orchestra, and you were you were even talking about how it was obviously just a self-funded thing that you did just for your passion for one. So I think all the fans that are watching this and have seen what you've done really appreciate that. Andrew, I did want to ask you in the same regard of what else have you been up to. I know you've done some other riffs here. You've done some songs. You have actually some channels out there, I thought, have featured your music. Where else has your music been featured, and how can fans kind of follow you?
Well, it's easy to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, Androl, Board of Time. Like, I think I'm known that everywhere. and,
yeah.
And yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, I did the intro for Daniel Green's new podcast.
Oh, fun. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's awesome.
And
That's
a total new endeavor because that's kind of synth music I made.
Oh, cool. I don't think I need to go.
I can't wait
I
to
haven't
hear
actually.
that.
Yeah, now I need to go check. There's two things I have to do. Is go read The End of the Great Hunt while listening to this and check out Daniel Green's new podcast. Yeah, absolutely. Again, just a reminder, if you want to give us a call, you can ask any questions you have about maybe what the experience has been like so far, interacting with fans, and actually creating music along the Wheel of Time, or give us some opinions that you have. Now, for those that are watching, I know Taylor's looking into the lottery and setting that up for us, and he's going to let us know once he can do that in chat for those that are interested in potentially seeing what that sneak peek is going to be like. So now I want to take the questions, and this is where I want to really interact with the fans here in chat, which is, okay, so we have this idea of a theme music, and we have this idea of, okay, there's all sorts of sounds from the world. What should have a sound or music to it? In other words, when it comes to the Wheel of Time, Androl, does the one power, should it have a sound to it in the show? I don't mean in the books. I mean for the show, for viewers, should the one power have a sound?
Maybe a sound, perhaps. I don't think it should have, a theme, maybe. But I prefer some kind of sound, or just to know that now something is afoot, because sometimes you don't. I presume they're not going to always show the weaves, except for when you have the point of view of the channeler. So, so if it's from the point of view of someone who can't channel, maybe there will be some kind of sound just to let the audience know that something is going on.
Yeah, I see in chat, and I'm kind of curious. Thumbs up for the one power should have this associated sound to it. Thumbs down is you don't want it to have its own. Basically, every sound that you hear you always know it's the one power. I'm kind of curious how fans think about this. I saw one of the users wrote chimes for the one power. Nikhil, what if the one power has a sound? What is the sound to you?
So yeah, I agree with Andro. I don't know that necessarily like a musical flourish every time the one powers. It's like it would get a little bit old after a while. But I do think from like a philosophical concept, it could be interesting to explore that, where like it's maybe not like a full-on melody, but it's like some sort of a musical embellishment or something where Saidin, I think is how it's pronounced, and Saidar, is that right?
Yeah, it's good enough.
Okay, cool. I'll take it. So for Saidin, I think it would be interesting to explore how that's different to Saidar, in the sense that there is like the Dark One's taint, and like it's almost got like an obsessive quality, like that threatens to consume you. That kind of a feeling could be interesting to explore, like the differences between those two.
Yeah, that's really compelling, because you could certainly split Saidin and Saidar. In other words, have some kind of difference there, whatever that, like you said, that I can't remember the word you used, but it wasn't quite necessarily like a chime, but some kind of
like a flourish of some
flourish.
Sort,
there we
like,
go. Yeah. But then also considering the taint, having, because we do have instances, and this doesn't spoil anything for anyone out there, but there are instances, well, maybe I'll stop there. I'll spoil it. Yeah. But let's say that would make a lot of sense to have the taint almost be something a little bit darker, and somehow communicate that with, like you said, some dissonance maybe to the flourish itself, something that lets you know that something's wrong in some form or fashion. I'm kind of curious that. Yeah, I see Rob Christiansen put scary bass rumbles for Saidin, like some rumbling effect to Saidin. It's an interesting thing, because if they do it again, it's going to be the flourish, the sound, whatever you want to call it, that we now associate. I wonder if some of us will start to hear the sound in our heads when we're reading, of the book. said Calendar can have the lightsaber sounds. I like that. No lightsaber sounds. No lightsaber sounds. Yeah, so what else? I mean, what else comes to mind here? That's a great point that you made, Nikhil, on that one power and maybe being able to use Robert Jordan's, the differences he's made in channeling actually show up in a sound way. What else out there might have its own sound? Let me throw out the concept of, we don't have to talk too much in detail, but a mirror world, for example. Would a mirror world sound different than the real world would?
Yeah.
Other worlds, and maybe we can keep it that generic, would other worlds have sounds? And, maybe you don't have to solve that immediately, but but yeah, would you want to know, Nikhil? Can you imagine what that might take, and what type of shape that David and his team might take when it comes to coming up with a sound for worlds themselves?
Just off the top of my head, if we were thinking about a mirror world as an example, I could almost see it where it's like you have some, I guess it depends on. I don't want to give too much away, but I guess
you're saying really generic.
There might be a way of repurposing a melody that one would use, or like a theme or a motif, and repurposing it, but kind of changing it a little bit where it feels like it would belong in this kind of mirror world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it's like a similar kind of motif or vibe, but it's almost like as if you were looking at it upside down, or like
that could be maybe a little bit of dissonance and almost like a little bit muted, like a wet blanket over it. So just to illustrate that there is something strange in this mirror world.
Yeah, I like the idea of muting it in some form or fashion, but also changing it too. So there's something that's off. Kind of curious, what other sounds? I mean, I've seen people talk about the ways, and other, tree singing is something that are clearly going to have its own actual music along with it. I would want to imagine, at least melody, if you will. What else is part of the Wheel of Time to you both as musicians? Do you think like that deserves its own either thematic kind of sound to it, or flourish, if you will? Is there anything kind of specific that kind of resonates with you, like this actually does need it when we get the Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime?
It could be kind of interesting, just as the concept of Tavern, and how like maybe even kind of like a Dragon Reborn a theme or something like that, but then also where it's almost like musical threads weaving together to create something for the Tavern. I don't know, it could be something interesting like that, where it's like you hear, it's almost like when you hear like an orchestral piece, right? You have like one melody line, and then you have another melody line going underneath it, and it kind of fills out the sound, right? But if you were to pull those apart, they almost sound like distinct melodies on their own. But when they come together, they create something new. And I think that could be an interesting kind of concept to explore musically.
Yeah, I like that idea that they could almost encourage, this subtle way of, not teaching isn't the right word, but subtle way of educating the viewer a bit on Taviran, for example, and when they're together, how they're affecting the world, but using music so you don't have this maybe visual disturbance in itself, but when two Taviran are together, or let's say three Taviran are together, and you almost can feel the wheel, if you will, twisting a bit, and you can feel strings being pulled in ways that they could add a little subtle. I absolutely love that idea. Androl, anything come to mind? Do you like this idea about the Taviran kind of having a layered effect when it comes to having its own melody, but then it comes together as one?
Yeah, it's almost like they all have their own motif, or their own theme song, but when they come together, it will be even bigger.
Yeah,
so I like that. I really like it.
Yeah, Taviran. I hadn't thought about the idea of actually using the music to educate, if you will. You could almost get rid of some of the exposition in some form or fashion with using some music. So I like that idea. I saw somebody bring up this idea in chat, which is, I kind of wonder, when it comes to the dream world itself, they've talked about the VFX for dreaming, because it's kind of hard to imagine we're not going to have some dreaming effects. Now, again, from a non-spoiler perspective, and I don't think this, again, ruins, I think there is a dream world in the Wheel of Time. And so having some awareness there, what comes to mind to both of you when it comes to Tel'aran'rhiod and the dream world from a musical perspective? Is there something that immediately hits you either from an instrument or from an effect standpoint?
I would say that I think because the dream world is kind of, it's not really there. It's more like a dream. So I think I want the music to be kind of hollow, not complete. Something is missing because you're not in the real world. You're not bound to the earth, but you are somewhere else. And I don't know. I think something like you got to feel that something is missing.
That's interesting. So you brought up hollow. I mean, I did see actually some people mentioning that Shantani put a muffled sound with no echoes. That's interesting.
Yeah.
To me, that almost sounds more like the Ways than necessarily Tel'aran'rhiod. Just that's my initial take on it. But kind of curious. I like that hollow idea. And I'm going to have you build on that in just a second, Nikhil. I want to remind everybody that's here in chat, Taylor just started up the raffle. If you want to be part of the sneak peek early viewing of Winter Dragon, The Dusty Wheel Cut, go ahead and type in !raffle in chat. And at the end of the show, we'll pick 2 of you to join us. So again, it's !raffle. Make sure you're over here on YouTube chat if you want to take part in what's going to be, I think, a really fun event next Sunday, and then the following Wednesday it will premiere. So, Nikhil, that idea of maybe a hollow sound in Tel'aran'rhiod, is there something else that you would layer on top of that? Do you have a different take on it?
I actually really like that idea, honestly. Androl's idea of that of the hollow sound sounds really cool. I think it could be also interesting to have it almost surrealist, where it's like, like the way the music flows. It might not even be a melodic thing. It might not even be necessarily different instruments for that. This is just like totally off the cuff.
I know, we're just riffing here.
As we're riffing, yeah. But I could imagine it maybe even being the same instruments, but just played or written in a way that's a little bit more flowy, a little bit more dreamlike, like where it's like it feels like it's a different play, a different interpretation of the same place in a way, So that could be really interesting. But I love the hollow idea too. I feel like where it's like you get that, it's like musical cues can serve such an important part in that storytelling process. So without having to kind of like hit people over the head with it, you can kind of subtly add the subtext that this is slightly different to what we're used to.
Now I want to add this to it. Again, staying away from spoilers, but Tel'aran'rhiod is a dream world that also can be, it can be somewhat dangerous at times. So I feel like there is some concept here where, and maybe it's just, it definitely is an emotional experience to be in Tel'aran'rhiod. That much is absolutely clear from the text in the book. So I kind of wonder if the music might play off the emotions of the person, if that makes sense. In other words, that the Tel'aran'rhiod is affected by that and how they interact with it. So you could potentially tie it into that experience also, is where I don't compose music, so I don't have anything, but to me, there's maybe an emotional thing here, which might be interesting. Would you, Andrew, though, with multiple people entering it, would that affect the dream world? If you had 2 other people, someone else comes in, would you want a person to have a sound? Do you want to be able to recognize a character in the TV series?
Well, if we're talking about the dream world entering, I think that, how much proficiency you have in entering, you have the ones who are better at it than others. So maybe their motif or, introductory music would be stronger, just like their will or their dominion over the dream world.
Yeah, someone pointed this out. This feels like a conversation Rafe and the composer would have had. You would think that they would definitely have had, or are still having these conversations, right? Yep. Which is, there's so much to take into account here. like Nikhil, you pointed out, you can communicate a lot. There's so much you could communicate, and the question is, how far do you go down that road? Like to that question of a person, should I know that maybe key characters are on screen, or potentially on screen somewhere I just can't tell because there's some particular sound? You know, like we have our famous epic Darth Vader, right?
Right.
That's you know at times, not only because of how he's breathing, but also when he enters. Do you want to see David Buckley, or basically, do you want to see this as an aspect to the Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime?
I personally feel like there are so many, one great thing about the Wheel of Time just as a series is there are so many characters, and the lore is so deep, and there's so much history, and there's so many different cultures. So I do feel like, and I'm sure David and Rafe are talking about this a lot, is like, what's the balance between too many themes and having accurate themes represent either like a world, like a dream world, versus or a different culture, or maybe a philosophical concept. I almost feel like focusing on themes that are present throughout the series could be a really good way of tying things together, where it's like, for example, like a Taveran thing, a Dragon Reborn thing, maybe a Forsaken thing, without any spoilers, but how the Blight would sound like, how the Aiel Waste would sound like, I think it could be interesting to explore it from like a cultural and also, some of the thematic parts of the show itself, or like the book series itself. And that could probably tie things together and make it feel cohesive for the viewer, who's already, it's like they're distilling down 15 or so books, very complex books into a TV series that not only, us super fans could watch, but that people who've never, that was the one good thing about Game of Thrones, is like people who are like typically, I don't watch fantasy, I don't read fantasy, they got into it as well. And trying to toe that line between the two, I think from a musical standpoint, it would be great as well to have some themes that are cohesive, that kind of, blanket and touch upon these different topics. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, you brought up a couple things here, which is, cultures, locations, and then also just more general themes. There's so many layers to this, that how deep do you go? For example, should the Aiel, does the entire Aiel population, whenever an Aiel's on screen, is there an awareness, musically from that? Or is it really just, more, musical people? Like obviously the Tinkers, Robert Jordan, he describes them, and you have drums and sharp trilling tunes and sometimes hypnotic tunes. Like he gives directions sometimes in the book, but that's for a people that are very specifically music oriented. But, like you brought out the Shanchan, right? How much do you go down the road of their speech and the accent in the books affecting what musical, association you have? Do we have a Southern U.S., association with the Shanchan because that's where Robert Jordan was thinking their accents were? How much does the accent apply in that way? So, Androl, would you, if you could make the choice, would you give each nation its own sound that people could recognize them by? There's so many nations, but would you go that deep?
No, I don't think so, because it will be so complex. It's so many nations, it's so many cultures. I think maybe, because I also want the music to be cohesive over the whole show, so that this is the Wheel of Time, independent of what culture or what place you are in. But maybe if you are in a certain location, they can add something extra, something exotic, or just to set it apart. And now we are in this place or with this culture, instead of making a whole new theme for every people, because I think that would be just so much.
It would be, and this is the complexity, right? We have so many books, we have so much material. Robert Jordan goes into so much detail about dress, habits, he describes a nation so well that it's tough. And maybe I'll ask chat this. Should a nation? I mean, should we get that? I mean, if a nation has its own way of dressing, its own way of acting, they have generally, there's some commonality obviously in the Westlands, but these nations have very specific peculiarities to them. Does each nation deserve its own thematic sound? And so thumbs up if you think each nation in the Wheel of Time deserves its own thematic sound, or thumbs down if you're like, that's just too much, and one with kind of embellishments here and there of the theme would be enough. I'm kind of curious how chat's going to answer this. Nikhil, I mean, is it worth the effort, though, to go down that road and give us something specific to each nation?
Maybe I almost feel like, again, I don't want to go maybe too much into detail because of the spoilers.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like trying to be very careful because people in this community have been so kind to me, and I want to pay it forward as much as possible.
Sure.
But I do feel like certain cultures, maybe certain areas that the characters find themselves in for extended periods of time, they could have maybe their own theme or instrumentation that is very colloquial to that region, things like that. I do feel though that just like they're trying to pare down this massive series into something that is not only coherent but an entertaining viewing experience for people who are fantasy aficionados, people who are first-time viewers. I think less can sometimes be more in that sense, meaning like having a few strong themes and then exploring some of those in big or small ways, or repurposing them in certain ways. I do feel though that it would probably be really valuable for David, and I'm sure that's what they're probably doing in this time leading up to the post-production process of actually sitting down and scoring, is like doing a deep dive of the maps, the culture, the history, the lore. Like It's always good to have that wash over you and then distill it down to its base elements and operate in writing music from that lens, of that understanding it from a deep way, but then distilling it down into something that people can grasp onto.
Yeah, and I'm sure that is a process. I mean, again, I don't. You guys compose music. I don't do this, but yeah, I'm sure that is the process, which is, it probably would be tempting to go really far and really deep and really apply something specific to each one. But like you said, I'm sure it's more of a distillation process, and less is more is likely the case. Is where I think you'll go. But I will say that those in chat, I saw a lot of thumbs up for this idea of actually having each nation have its own sound, which again, and that's this comes down to not everyone's going to be pleased. We've already seen that with the Wheel of Time fans. We know that, having spoken about the Wheel of Time a lot on the internet. But that's not the point. It's not about like pleasing the fans. It's what's good with Rafe and David is they're going to do what's hopefully best for the show, right? Yeah. What is going to be most meaningful, and we're going to have lots of seasons, right?
Yeah,
we're going to have lots of seasons of the show. And so I feel like that's where the layering in of more of these aspects could come in. You don't have to, I think, go too far down this road just yet, maybe in season 1, and they can build on what they've come up with. But they have time. I guess that's my point. Yeah. They have a lot of time to kind of figure that out. There's a second quote that I found about Robert Jordan, and it had a musical element. I thought it would be fun to kind of include in the show. So let's throw this up here. Robert Jordan's second quote, he was asked at DragonCon, can you make music using just the one power? And he said, yes, you could. So this question goes to everyone in chat and to both of you. Do you want to see the one power used to make music in the TV series? Thumbs up in chat if you do. Thumbs down if you're like, no. I don't need any of that flourish. I don't want wasted weaves on music. I don't need those. The arts. We don't need to support the arts in the Wheel of Time that way. Now, to both of you, Androl, would you want to see that, knowing that it's possible? Would you want to see that happen in the show?
I don't know, actually. That's a strange idea. I don't think we will see an Aes Sedai bard anytime soon. But maybe, calling in for lessons or something like that, make a bell ring or something.
I can see. I can see. Well, what's interesting is they always talk about Aes Sedai, and especially people who have the ability that's inborn to channel, who end up developing some kind of special capability, some ability. So I think you could find it where somebody, special ability was to create music, and that was their little thing that they didn't want to tell anybody about. But they could do this, and you see it show up in the tower. I absolutely could see that. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up for that one. Occasional thumb down on that. How about you, Nikhil? Would you want to see this happen in the show?
Could be interesting to see like a duet with the Gleeman, like Tom or something, but I don't know. I don't know. It's not something that would have come to mind immediately, but it's an interesting thing to explore. To me personally, I think the more compelling version of how music could be used in connection to the One Power would be exploring that Saidin Saidar. How they're two parts of the same whole and yet so different. I love that. I'm very much into like Eastern philosophy anyway, so maybe I'm biased, but like I love exploring that, and I think that from a musical standpoint could be very interesting to explore. It's not something I would have personally thought of, but I think it'd be interesting to explore anyways.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'll be surprised, I guess, for me, if they don't really focus on the One Power from a musical standpoint, just from the differentiation potentially. I think they're obviously going to have thematic music at some level. We're going to get some internal cultural music, definitely from the Tinkers. We know, for those of you that are watching, we know the Tinkers are part of the Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime. Therefore, we can kind of assume that that's part of David's job here is probably to come up with some stuff regarding the Tinkers. So we know some of the things that we'll definitely get. And I kind of wonder, like you said, if they'll just focus on the One Power, and maybe down the road we might see some of these kind of fun little tweaks of the One Power and music together. I saw someone in chat put in that maybe this will be related to Asmodean later on in the show, later on in the series. For those of you watching, and that's not a spoiler, there's a character named Asmodean.
That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. Somebody just put in that we said some spoilers. I hope I didn't say any spoilers here. I apologize if I put any spoilers out there. But yeah,
it's so tough to talk about it without without giving anything away. It's like, oh, when those characters did that one thing in that one place, it's like
yeah, exactly. Maybe it was about Tinkers. Yeah, there's a group of Tinkers in the Wheel of Time. Yeah, I guess I apologize if that spoiled anything for anyone. This whole series of questions, there's so many more. It was fun to kind of continue watching people talk about this.
Yeah.
These must be questions they're tackling. I'm sure there are other things here. For example, we know objects of power potentially could be related to music. There are things in the books, just generally speaking, that certainly could have them. And we know that our world we know that the world of the Third Age, like you said, is the way distant future of this world, and we know that so that I can imagine, if this makes sense, that there are leftovers. there's things out there maybe it could be associated with music in some form or fashion. Maybe I'll just keep it right there. Now, for those of you that have been participating today in chat, I really appreciate you jumping in and joining this raffle. Taylor, why don't we pick our two winners here, and then I'm going to get some final thoughts from Nikhil and Androl and ask them where fans can kind of continue following their trajectory here. So you have this last moment. I'll give you 30 seconds. Anyone that wants to join in the raffle, again, it's !raffle in chat. Then we will pick two winners for those that want to show up at our sneak peek of the premiere of the Dusty Wheel cut of Winter Dragon. We'll talk more about that as the week progresses. So I think we're down. I don't see anybody else jumping in to ask for it. So Taylor, are you ready to? That's true. They are just barely hearing me. We'll give them a second here to. Yeah, we do need drums. How did we not come up with drums, you two? Yeah, we should have had some drums to get ready for this. But yeah, here we go. I guess you're right, Taylor. They are seeing this. We'll give them one more second here. I always forget that delay when I'm talking. Like, to me, chat is just like, it's definitely on time here. So, yeah, we need to add that to the show. We need some musical. I know. Taylor's pointing out that we totally failed in adding drums to the show about music. Yeah, we screwed up. We screwed up there, everybody. Okay, so it looks like everyone's jumping in that happens to be maybe didn't know about this, so we'll give them just a second. And then we'll do this. We'll make our pick. And Taylor, why don't you? I think everyone's had a chance here, so why don't we close out the lottery and let's pick our 2 winners. This is when we need This is when we need. Androl, do you have drums anywhere? You can't like give us a little intro.
Drum roll, please.
You know, I actually have a snare drum here, but I don't think my neighbors would appreciate it.
That's okay. You don't need to give us a snare drum. Taylor, go ahead and pick our first winner. Taylor's going through it. Yeah. Okay, so Taylor's figuring out that piece. Yeah. So while Taylor figures that out to pick the winner, Nikhil, when it comes to future projects for the Wheel of Time, I mean, are you considering making more music like this? Have you been inspired as you've read through? Like, I would like to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I was saying, the Wheel of Time has really opened the door for me fantasy-wise. Ever since then, I've been reading a lot of, like I read Mistborn trilogy recently. I'm on Stormlight Archive. I'm also reading Dresden Files. I'm like totally I'm going all out right now. So it's always like, for me at this point, it's a struggle between, do I write music right now or do I finish the rest of this book? And it's a great struggle. So I definitely want to make this a regular occurrence. And I'm looking into a couple of other potential series. I would love to do another thing for Wheel of Time, funds permitting. It's always so like, that's the one thing, it's like, it's always it always takes a lot to kind of put everything together. But I would love to do something for the Wheel of Time again, and I would love to try maybe something for one of these other series as well.
Yeah. So if you had to choose, maybe I'll put you on the spot here. Yeah. So you've read up to 12 books. No spoilers here, but is there something that you would like to, if you did and you had the funds and you decided to, is there a theme in the books where you would want to try to tackle it and see if you could come up with your own vision for something like that you've explained today?
I think that's a very good question, actually.
So yeah, I can. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say. I think it could be interesting to do, maybe like a Forsaken theme. Okay. Or I just love like the epic stuff, so I'm always like veering towards that. I could see that having some some of that, but I think it'd be actually kind of interesting to do like a Two Rivers theme, like what the calm before the storm, like what that would sound like. Could be interesting because there's a bit of naivete there. There's a little bit of unknown, like it's like they're just minding their own business, and then So I think that kind of innocence would be interesting to capture in the music as well. So I guess those two would be, for very different reasons, interesting to me.
Yeah, for almost opposite reasons. Right,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Okay, Androl, before I have you answer that question, Taylor's ready to pick our first winner. So the drum roll in your minds, please. Alex, thanks in chat with little drum icon in chat. Let's pick our first winner. And I was like, when is it going to happen? It's going to show up in chat here shortly. It's always this dead space of time where it's quiet and everyone's like, what's happening? Eduardo Hernandez has won an early viewing of Winter Dragon, The Dusty Wheel Cut. Eduardo, get a hold of me on Discord or social media. You can jump in right after this onto our Discord channel, where you can find us in the description of this show itself. You can find all links to all of our social media. But congratulations. I hope you will enjoy that next Sunday. That'll be awesome. And now let's pick our second viewer. And Elizabeth Willoughby, welcome and congratulations also. So Eduardo and Elizabeth, please get a hold of me, like I said, through social media, over on Discord or on Twitter. and we'll arrange that so you can be part of the special group of invitees to that sneak peek before we premiere the Dusty Wheel cut on September 2nd. So congratulations again. Yeah, Androl, as we finishing us off here on the show, is there any kind of future project you're working on that you want to tell fans about? Just something you would like to do or are doing that you'd like to let them know to follow you?
Well, I would love to if people follow me, but the only thing I'm working on is trying to get my damn album done. My Wheel of Time, Twitter of Time album I've been working on for more than a year. I said I would have it done in January. I failed. I'm sorry about that. But it's much harder to produce an album all by yourself in your living room than I thought it would be.
Well, so a question for you on that. You did release a song today as part of that album on
Yes,
YouTube. Is that part of the Wheel of Time album itself, or is that a different album? Okay.
That will be a part of the Wheel of Time album, yes.
Awesome. So it's a great song. Like I said, within about 15, 20 seconds, it reminded me of Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. It had like
That's awesome.
It brought me there, but just enough that it kind of got me in that mood, if you will, that Pink Floyd had kind of established. But you kind of took me away from there and into something else, which was awesome. You can find a link to that and to Nikhil's music and such in the description of the video. Go check them both out. Check out Androl's album as it begins. Follow them on social media. You're going to enjoy it, and you're not going to be able to probably watch or listen to either the riff to the Dusty Wheel or the Budapest Orchestra enough, because at least I can't. Like, I enjoy them both. There's just something, there's life to them that it's life-giving. So yeah, I really appreciate you both being here. This was a lot of fun.
So much.
I'm gonna if you have ideas, if you're watching this and you have other ideas, look for them. I can't wait to see what you say in the comments about the questions that we had today. If you're watching this later. Or what else did we miss? What in the books deserves, again, a flourish, a sound, a thematic quality that we're not talking about. I'm kind of curious to see that in the comments itself. And as a little treat to those of you out there, we're going to smash to black a little bit different than we normally do. So as we say around here at the Dusty Wheel, good afternoon and smash to black.